I have a list of my favorite games of all time. Some of these games I consider to be perfect, while others I love despite their flaws. Today, we'll be taking a look at my 7th favorite game, Dungeon Defenders. Dungeon Defenders was released for consoles in 2010 and would later come to PC in 2011. It is described as a tower defense action RPG, which is only kind of true. It certainly is a tower defense game at its core, but as you progress further into the game, it begins to shift, but we'll get to that later. The goal of the game is to complete the maps by surviving waves of enemies and protecting the Eternia crystals. Initially, the maps are simple, with only one crystal to protect. But as you progress, maps become exceedingly more complex with multiple crystals, paths, and new enemies. I don't remember exactly when I first played it, but I know my first experience with it was playing the trial from the Xbox Live Store. I wasn't able to buy the game outright during that time, so I was stuck with the demo. Eventually, when I got older and bought my own computer, I was able to buy it for PC. And now, all these years later, I have 4 Steam accounts with the game. But that's enough background. Let's get into actually playing the game. The main story of the base game is split into 3 arcs, each containing 4 maps, and culminating in a boss battle. For Arc 1, and for the game as a whole, the first map is the Deeper Well. For me, the Deeper Well is an incredible map. I think it's absolutely perfect as an introduction into the mechanics of the game. Now that we're in the game though, I should talk about the actual heroes you can play. For now, I'll just go over the 4 heroes that were released in the base game. There's the Squire, who is slow and tanky, and his towers reflect that playstyle for the most part, except for the Ballista Tower, which is incredible. There's the Apprentice, who uses elemental magic towers. All of his towers are pretty good, but for the base game, the best one would most likely be the Fireball Tower, in my opinion. There's the Huntress, who places traps along the paths of the enemies, causing damage and multiple negative effects. And finally, there's the Monk, who uses auras to debuff the enemies and damage them as they pass through their zones of influence. There are more heroes that were added later, but we'll cover those when we get to them. I completed the base game story with just the Squire pretty much, so we'll stick with that for now. Back on the Deeper Well, the map is pretty easy to beat with it being symmetrical and only having a couple of different paths that the enemies can go down, as well as some pretty simplistic enemies being the Goblin, Archer, and Orcs. I wanted to play through the game on a higher difficulty, so I played it again on Insane to get some more experience before I moved on to the next map. Now would be a good time to talk about the difficulties in the game. There are 4 difficulties you have access to without DLC, and 2 higher difficulties with DLC. The 4 difficulties you get access in the base game are Easy, Medium, Hard, and Insane. Easy to Hard are pretty similar, with the only real difference being the health and damage amounts of the enemies. On Insane, the enemies still get a buff to their health and damage, but there are also extra challenges, the most important one being a timer during the build phase, in combination with the build phase no longer giving a boost to hero cast rate, which means summoning, upgrading, and repairing towers takes much longer. Another thing to keep in mind is that the Eternia crystals no longer heal between waves, which isn't as much of a big deal, as you shouldn't be letting them take damage in the first place. All these effects remain when going from Insane to Nightmare, but we'll cover Nightmare later. The next map is Foundries and Forges, which I really do not like. It feels like a major step down compared to the Deeper Well. The most effective strategy in my opinion is to build around the Eternia crystal and let the enemies funnel into the 3 main choke points, but if you do that, it takes forever for the enemies to walk up all the way to it. Another thing against this map is the fact that the next map is basically the same layout, but it's much better executed. Even though it kind of takes a while sometimes, it's still pretty easy, and it does introduce 2 new enemy types, the Ogre and the Kobold. Ogres are generally used as mini-bosses in the base game to add difficulty to final waves of maps, and Kobolds can be pretty annoying as they get a huge movement speed increase when they take damage and then they explode on contact, dealing a bunch of damage to your towers or yourself. After finishing Foundries and Forges, I went back to Deeper Well again to do another run on Insane to level up some more with the intention of doing the rest of the maps on Insane. The third map of Arc 1 is Magus Quarters, which I think is okay. It doesn't feel very special to me, but I don't think it's as bad as Foundries and Forges, and it's more of a direct upgrade given that it's the same layout. It also introduces a new enemy type, the Wyvern, which isn't as limited in terms of where it can come from as it can fly across the map. I take a detour after finishing Magus Quarters to a map outside of the original story. These maps are called the Lost Quest, which is not to be confused with the DLC extension of the main story called the Quest for the Lost Eternia Shards. The map in question is called Dread Dungeon, which I think is another great map. It gives good experience on higher difficulties and it definitely evokes the Deeper Well vibes. I'm doing a bit earlier than I probably should have, even on the lowest difficulty, but I just wanted to see if I could. Unfortunately, after completing Dread Dungeon, I was still unable to afford the dragon pet in the shop. I didn't want to sell any of my gear to get it, so I just locked it so it wouldn't refresh after the next map and decided to buy it after. The tavern is kind of like a hub world for you, where you can go back, check some DPS, adjust your gear, and then choose whatever mission you want to go to next. The tavern keeper lets you buy weapons, gear, and pets, although usually they're not very good in the later stages of the game. I did deeper well on Insane again to get some experience and some more mana so I can afford the dragon. While it plays in the background though, let's talk about some of the stats and gear you can equip to your heroes. First, you have your HP and mana. HP is your health, and if it falls to 0, you die, and your mana is what you use to summon and upgrade towers as well as use abilities. This screenshot was taken within the tavern, which is showing a much bigger number for your mana. That's because mana is also used in upgrading and purchasing gear. The next set of stats labeled hero is about your hero stats. Your hero health, damage, speed, and casting rate. The next set of stats are your hero abilities. These are skills that you can activate in battle. The defensive stats boost what your towers are capable of. Tower HP, tower damage, tower range, and tower attack rate. Finally, there are resistances, which come entirely from the gear that you have equipped. These provide a damage reduction based on a percentage to the 4 different types of damage within the game. Generic, fire, lightning, and poison. Moving over to the gear side, you have 4 slots for armor, a helmet, a chest piece, gauntlets, and boots. There are also multiple accessory slots which allow you to get even more statistical bonuses. You can see I have one equipped here from my run on Dread Dungeon called the Bracers. The other accessories are brooches and masks. There are also shields, but those can only be equipped to the Squire or Countess heroes. Finally, you also have pets and weapons. Some heroes can equip 2 weapons or 2 pets, but most heroes can only equip 1 weapon and 1 pet.
Can I help you find anything? Do what you can to defend the Eternal crystals.
Next up was the final map of Arc 1, Alchemical Laboratory. I love this map. Me and my friends spent hours farming survival on this map when we didn't know any better and thought this would be the best way to get gear pushing into nightmare mode. I just like the way it's laid out and the vibes, although it's pretty symmetrical. This map also introduces the mage or shaman enemy, which can summon skeletons and heal its allies. They can be pretty annoying if they hang outside of the range of your towers. I decided to try this on hard and not insane, as I wasn't sure if I would be able to beat the boss on insane. I think I made the right choice. The boss of this map is the Demon Lord, who is pretty simple to defeat, especially if you know it's coming, but on insane, there's a lot of HP and damage increases that go into that. As you can see, my strategy at this point is just spamming ballistas everywhere so that they can shoot at the Demon Lord, and realistically, in the main campaign, the ballista tower is basically all you need if you're playing the Squire. Man, that sucks so shit. This is good though. As you can see, some maps have end of map rewards or completion bonuses, which are items you can only get by completing the map on a certain difficulty. These will become a lot more important later, but for right now, they tend to not be very good and they get replaced pretty quickly. The first map in Arc 2 is Servants' Quarters. All the maps in Arc 1 were symmetrical, and this is quite a huge departure from that. There are many different paths, changes in elevation, and corners of the map that, if not properly defended, will cause you to lose. For a while, I really didn't like this map. I thought it was too much of a shift from the maps leading up to it, and it should have been eased into a bit more. These days, I like that it's so radical. Plus, it increases the amount of crystals to defend as well. Of course, even on insane difficulty, the tried and true method of ballista spam on choke points works like a charm. I should also mention that I'm doing these maps with the hardcore modifier on, which is a difficulty modifier which grants you extra experience and some better gear drops in exchange for removing the ability to respawn during a wave. The map is relatively easy, but if you're solo, you have to make sure you properly defend this little alleyway back here. Mages tend to come out of this path quite a bit, and if you have your defenses set up in the wrong way, they can just infinitely summon skeletons while they hide behind the corner out of the sight of your towers. Next up is Castle Armory, which I feel is a step down from Servants' Quarters. You had such a huge shift into sprawling, complicated map structure, and then the very next map is back to being symmetrical. It still has 2 crystals to defend, and it does have some verticality though. This map is also the first time you encounter Dark Elf warriors, which will follow the normal path until they see a hero and then rush and jump over towers to try and kill the hero. I initially tried this map on Insane, but it didn't go so well. Oh no. How the fuck? Alright. Well. And then, on the second try of that run on hard, the servers die. That sucks. Feeling a bit demotivated, I decided to level up some other heroes that I'll be needing eventually. You can make it through the base game with almost any hero on your own, but for late game maps, you need to use a combination of heroes. Ideally you would have friends to play this with, but it can all be done solo too. For this first batch, I make a monk, a summoner, and a series EV. The monk is one of the 4 base classes, and is generally the best all-around DPS hero in the game. DPS heroes in this game refer to heroes that do damage with their weapons or abilities, and they generally focus on stats like hero damage, hero health, and whatever abilities they use. Builder heroes are heroes that use towers, and they tend to focus on stats increasing their towers instead. The summoner is mostly a builder hero, as it cannot equip a weapon, and the towers it builds have their own classification. The game would be super easy if you could build as many towers as you want, so they have something called defense units to limit your ability to place towers. Each tower has a defense unit cost, and once you reach the cap, you cannot place any more. The summoner is powerful because his units require a separate currency called minion units, so if you use the summoner, you are effectively doubling the amount of towers you can place on a map. There are some niche cases where the ability for the summoner to equip 2 pets comes in handy in terms of DPS, but like I said, they're niche. Finally, the Series EV, or EV for short, is really quite specialized. It can be the most effective pure DPS hero in the game with its Proton Blast ability combined with specific weapons and other supporting heroes. It also has incredibly powerful towers that allow you to construct physical walls and projectile walls, and its strongest tower is the Tower Buff Beam, which can more than double the effectiveness of other towers placed on it with high enough stats. I should also note that you don't actually need 3 extra controllers to add extra heroes in the game. The community development team added what is essentially a controller emulator into the game itself, so you can add and swap between different characters using the function keys on your keyboard, which is super useful for leveling up other heroes and multiplying the amount of rewards you can get for completing maps. I went back to Castle Armory afterwards and managed to beat it on hard. Next up is Hall of Court, which is another symmetrical map. Really the only thing you have to worry about is the wyverns that might bypass your towers, but once you know where they come from, it's a pretty easy map to handle. I did try it on Insane first, but I ended up losing, so I went back to hard to beat it. Finally, we're at the final map of Arc 2, the Throne Room. This is the 3rd map in a row that is symmetrical, which isn't inherently bad, but I just feel like they should have been mixing up more. There are 3 main paths and 2 side paths, so it's not super complicated, but there's a lot of ways you have to cover. The boss of this map is a goblin in a mech suit. It's pretty slow, but it can fire homing missiles that deal quite a bit of damage if you don't have any resistances. The mech itself has a lot of damage resistance, but if you attack the back, eventually the hatch will open up, and hitting that spot will deal double damage. The first map of Arc 3 is Royal Gardens. I'm not super fond of this map. It is symmetrical with 3 crystals to defend, but it just doesn't feel good to play. You have 1 big door at the bottom which allows for some neat verticality, but the threats aren't really from the main doors. One of the side paths can be overrun with shamans if you aren't prepared for it, which is how most people would probably lose on this map. It also has a lot of wyverns that come from nowhere, so you have to prepare for those as well as a bunch of kobolds from some of the side paths. Following Royal Gardens is my favorite map of the main campaign, the Ramparts. This map is just cool, with a lot of better executed verticality and fun ways to move from different areas. There are 2 main choke points, and then a fun little side alley that has a fair amount of enemies going through it. There are wyverns, of course, but you can set up towers to handle them that also help with the ground-based enemies when there are no wyverns to be shot at. After beating the ramparts on Insane again to get some more experience, I took a detour to do one of the original challenges in the game, Ogre Crush. This is a challenge set on the map Castle Armory where the only enemies are ogres, and eventually there will be an ogre coming from each door and then 2 ogres coming from each door on the final wave. I probably wouldn't be able to beat it on Insane, so I'm only doing it on hard for right now, but the main reason I'm playing this map is for the end of map reward. The end of map reward for this map on hard is something called the High Five, which is a squire weapon, sort of like a gauntlet. I'm hoping that this weapon will give me a lot more stats, and I can also upgrade to deal some good DPS when I'm just running around during the wave. The weapon I got isn't particularly great, but it'll do for now. I'm not currently level 60, but doing the ramparts one more time will get me there. I spent some time continuing to level up some of my other heroes, and I also decided to do survival on the deeper well. Survival is a game mode where you have to beat many waves of enemies, usually 25, 30, or 35. Survival maps is generally where you're going to find the best armor, and also your best pets. Most maps have a middle map reward for pets, and a map completion reward. The deeper well, obviously being the easiest map, doesn't have particularly great middle map survival rewards, or armor rewards for that matter. But the reason we're doing this is because there's a secret end of map reward for the deeper well survival on easy mode. The reward is a pet called Nessie. Instead of attacking, Nessie has the ability to heal your heroes, but we don't really care about that. What we care about is the fact that its tower stats are always capped at 100, and the fact that it has no level requirement, so you can equip it no matter how low your level is. This is going to be a great boost to my current hero, the Squire, and it'll also make all the other heroes I've been leveling up instantly more viable. Our penultimate map is Endless Spires, which takes a similar setting as the Ramparts but says, what if it was at night and bigger? I think this is a step back from the Rampart setup, but it's a fine map, and it's also kind of useful later on. Basically, there are 3 main choke points with wyverns of course, but the map is just so big. You're going to spend most of your time waiting for enemies to reach your towers than you are actually fighting the enemies. You'd also set up your towers closer to the doors, but then you're splitting more resources to each door, and you also have to run for a long time to get to those other sections. Most heroes that play through the campaign on medium or hard will probably only have 20 or 40 points in hero speed from their gear, so they are probably still pretty slow. The map definitely feels like it was designed for having 3 or 4 players in mind rather than solo. It's at this point you're starting to see that I'm using the other heroes that I've been leveling up. In this case, I'm using some of the auras from the monk and the tower buff beam from the series EV. Using multiple heroes' towers on each map is going to be the best strategy moving forward, but we'll cover that a bit more later. Our final map is called the Summit. A dark and stormy night defending against hordes of enemies, only to face a mighty and powerful dragon. This map is alright. It's symmetrical, of course, but it has some verticality even though it makes it a bit awkward to move around sometimes. It's got one main big choke point down on one side, and 3 smaller staircases leading up to another crystal on the side. Finally, there are 2 small choke points you have to worry about, along with the wyverns coming from different directions. The boss, as I said before, is a big dragon. It'll fly around the map, and you have to shoot a harpoon from one of the 4 spots around the map to knock it down, and make it appear on one of the 3 battlements before you can really damage it. If you know this is how it works, it's relatively easy to prepare for, but I think for a first time player, it'd be a pretty decent challenge. I think the Summit does a good job of being the final map of the campaign, even if I do have some issues with it. Now that's technically the end of Arc 3, but there is a bonus map that was released at the time as well, called Glitterhelm Caverns. It's important that it be included along with the challenge maps that were initially released with the game for something I'm going to say a bit later, but let's talk about the map first. Glitterhelm Caverns is a large underground map with a bunch of doors and more ogres than any of the main campaign maps have had so far. It also brings about a new mechanic, which is basically random door enemies. If there is an enemy counter floating in the middle of the map, that means those enemies can come from any door. So on this map, all 4 ogres for a wave could come out of the same door. It makes it a bit more interesting to prepare your defenses. I really enjoy this map, but I do think they had missed an opportunity for the upper portion that is so far removed from the rest of the map. That crystal is basically only under threat by the door up there as well as some wyverns. I think it would have been cool to have another door somewhere that would allow you to defend along the bridge as well. That does it for the main campaign. I won't go too much into detail on all the challenge maps that were released with the base game, but I'll list them here along with the rest. At this point I want to say, I consider this portion of the game to be perfect. I know I've listed a couple gripes with some of the maps and whatnot, but truly, the main campaign, challenges, and the easy to insane difficulty progression, as well as 0 to level 60, feels really great. If you have some friends, or even as a solo player, I would highly recommend it. You can get dozens of hours just out of this content. Now, moving into DLC territory is where things get a little iffy. There are definitely more maps that aren't DLC that you could try after completing the campaign, but you're going to need the DLC if you want to continue playing the game and progressing. Dungeon Defenders was made in a time where DLC was released in small packs, so there's quite a lot of it. Luckily, there's a collection bundle you can buy that often goes on sale for $10, which I would definitely recommend. It won't get you all the DLCs, as there have been a couple new DLCs released over the past few years from the community development team, but it gets you all the main ones you would need to progress further than the main campaign. First, we need to go over the new heroes. 4 of these new heroes, the Adept, Countess, Ranger, and Initiate, are just the opposite gender versions of the original 4 heroes. They have some slightly altered movement and HP stats as well as unique abilities, but the towers they summon are the same as their counterparts. If you're trying to min-max, you should make all the builders female because they have a higher movement speed compared to their male counterparts. Then we have the Jester. The Jester is effectively worthless as a builder. You can do some wacky stuff with them, but it's not going to win you the harder maps. The real use for Jester is that they have the fastest casting speed of all the characters, allowing them to upgrade and repair super fast, as well as their Wheel of Fortuna ability. Commonly referred to as wheeling, using the ability will bring up a slot machine that, if you time it right, you can get the exact combo you want. Some of these combos are such boons, like damaging all enemies, killing a certain percentage of enemies outright, and healing all allies and towers. There are some negatives you can get as well, but assuming you time it right again, it's not going to matter. Barbarian's up next. This hero was unique at the time of release as it could not build any towers. Instead, it was able to dual-wield swords and had a variety of stances to boost different aspects and stats. You would think that such a specialized DPS hero would be one of, if not the best DPS hero in the game, but unfortunately not. As cool as dual-wielding swords are, it just can't measure up to the Monk or Series EV in most scenarios. It can do massive single-hit damage with its Hawk stance, which does give it some niche use cases, but the utility of the Monk and the pure numbers of the EV are just more useful. I already went over both the EV and Summoner earlier, but I'll mention them here since they are both DLC heroes. Finally, we've come to the more recent additions by the community development team. The Hermit has seen some great use with its powerful towers allowing new strategies on many maps, mostly the Forest Golem for drawing aggro. Its other towers are quite strong as well. You can build a DPS hero, but it's not really set up for that. Next is the Gun Witch, which is basically like the Barbarian. They use guns and can debuff enemies while dealing great damage with numerous offensive abilities. It's still a bit niche, and it did not surpass the Monk or EV for DPS hero, but it can be fun. Then, literally right as I'm editing this portion of the video, they just released another update with a new hero called the Warden. I'm not going to talk about it very much since I've never used it, so I don't really know what it's about exactly, but they also updated some things, namely hugely buffing the Squire and Countess, so that's pretty cool. I'm happy about that, but I just thought I'd mention it here. The next main bit of DLC we'll go over is the quest for the Lost Eternia Shards. This is a direct continuation of the main story, taking you through 4 difficult maps, each with their own boss fights and new enemies, culminating in a gauntlet map and another final boss in the Crystalline Dimension. These maps will seriously test your skills. This DLC series also unlocks the next difficulty mode called Nightmare. Let's talk about Nightmare mode for a second. It's a bit rough initially. The way I see it, if I was a new player with no clue about anything, and I was just moseying along during the game and managed to beat the summit on insane difficulty, I feel like I would think, oh, since I was able to beat the final campaign map on insane, I should now be able to beat another map on the next difficulty, which would be Nightmare. It seems reasonable to me, but actually if you tried that, you would get stomped into the ground. It's really quite a big difficulty spike, and if you don't know what to do or how to acquire the next set of gear that you would need, it can be pretty frustrating. Nightmare also brings a set of changes from Insane as well. Some of the main ones include that your hero DPS is terribly nerfed, and your damage resistance is cut in half. There are some buffs though, like tower HP, tower damage, and pet damage being increased, but it's kind of a trade-off. You saw me leveling up some heroes earlier, and as I said before, you'll need to use a combination of heroes in order to beat the more difficult maps, as well as Nightmare mode in general. You probably could do some of the maps with a single hero, but you would need higher stats and a lot of game knowledge. Here's a rundown of every hero you should probably have. A DPS monk and EV, caster/wheeler jester, a booster monk, a builder initiate, huntress, adept, summoner, EV, hermit, and countess. I don't know about the warden yet because, it just came out. That's 11 heroes, all needing to be leveled up, 4 pieces of armor, weapons, and pets. It seems like a lot, and it is, but you can do multiple things at once. Once you have a good XP farm map that you like, you can level up 4 heroes at the same time. Running survivals for armor will net you more than you probably need for the average gear, and you can get multiple of the same types of end of map weapon or pet rewards by having specific heroes loaded in when the map finishes. Moving into what is effectively the early game of the late game, another thing worth mentioning is the level curve. Dungeon defenders use an exponential level curve, nicely broken into tiers based on gear requirements. Heroes are able to equip godly gear at level 60. Going from level 0 to 60 requires just over 2 million experience points in total. The next tier, Mythical, is at 74. Going from 60 to 74 requires about 16 million experience points. Next is Transcendent at 78, requiring 50 million. Supreme at 83 requires 80 million more. Ultimate at 90 requires 230 million more. Ultimate 93 requires about 160 million. And then finally Ultimate Plus and Ultimate Plus Plus requiring you to be the max level of 100, which requires a total of 1 billion experience points gained, or from 93 to 100 being 500 million more. To move into Nightmare, you essentially need to be able to equip mythical gear, so you need your heroes to be at level 74. You can try some Nightmare maps without mythical gear, but it'll be a lot easier if you had some. Some people prefer to do harder maps on their first waves, like Tinker's Lab. I think that's probably going to be the objectively fastest, but it requires a lot more input having to set up towers every minute or two rather than setting up once and letting the waves run for the entire map. A good way to get some of your first decent pieces of mythical gear is to do the first wave of Endless Spires, and then open the chests before the build phase ends on the next wave. Doing this over and over again will net you some pretty good armor, with stats in the 60 to 100 range. You want to make sure to open the chests with a summoner though, since they can't equip weapons, the only things that will drop will be armor pieces. I tried to do Dread Dungeon on Survival Insane because I thought the end of map reward would give me a good pet, but it turned out it was just a giraffe and it wasn't even very good. What? It's just a giraffe? Oh, brother. It's so bad. Oh, man. After realizing I was just being stupid, I just went to Moonbase to get the Fish in the Bowl pet. It's a great starting builder pet, and doing this Dance Dance minigame is pretty easy. Trying to get the treadmill on a treadmill pet from this minigame though, that'll be a lot harder, but that's not until way later. Unfortunately, the build I used to use back in the day didn't really work out this time. No! No! This can't be how it ends! While my next attempt plays out in the background, now is a good time to talk about another thing that doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the game, but I do think it's kind of weird, and I don't really enjoy the fact that it's kind of a requirement almost. What I'm referring to is tower stacking, which is technically possible in the game, just skill-based, if you time things right. But most people use a script that automatically does it, and I use a script too, just because it makes it super easy. But a lot of later game maps and builds and things of that nature will require you to use tower stacking, which essentially just means placing towers directly on top of one another. I don't feel like the game was designed with that kind of in mind, and so it feels a little iffy to me, and I wish it probably wouldn't be the case that it's kind of a requirement. You can see an example of it here. I'm able to place fireball towers directly on top of one another, which normally you shouldn't be able to do, and the amount of towers you can place on a single buff beam allowing you to save precious defense units on later maps, it just makes things a lot easier, and I don't think it was the game's intention to allow this to happen, but it almost feels like a lot of these newer maps are almost designed around the fact that you can do this, so it's kind of like, you know, if you're not doing it, you're just kind of making things harder for yourself for no reason. So, like I said, it doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the game. I still play it. I still love it. It's just, I think I would prefer, you know, it would take the game from a 90 to 100 if all of the maps were designed with the intention of, you know, playing it with, you know, just vanilla-esque type of thing. You know, I would consider it almost like an exploit. I do manage to succeed though on this next attempt with my new build, and I get my fish in the bowls, along with a few extra weapons from the Moonbase end of map rewards. Then, now with new weapons and pets, I do it again, so I get even more weapons and pets. While my first attempt on Dread Dungeon Nightmare plays in the background, I'll talk about something I probably should have talked about a bit earlier. By wearing a full set of matching gear, like pristine, plate, or chain, you get a bonus to the stats that they provide you. That bonus also increases with the gear tier. So everything up to Godly gives a 25% set bonus, but Mythical gives 30%, Transcendent gives 33, Supreme 36, and Ultimate gears are 40. They are also separated into pre-mythical and post-mythical sets. So, you can equip a Godly, a Shining, a Powerful, and a Cursed piece of gear, and they'll all give you the bonus if they're all of the same type, like Pristine or Chain. But, if you swapped any of those gears out for a mythical piece of gear, the set bonus no longer works. Likewise, you can combine Mythical, Transcendent, Supreme, Ultimate in any fashion you want, as long as they're the same type, being Pristine, Chain, so on, but you can't combine lower pieces of gear, so 3 Mythicals and a Godly piece would not give you a set bonus. My next step was to get even better armor, so I decided to run Dread Dungeon on Nightmare. It's a relatively easy map that will get you some good Mythicals, as well as your first couple Transcendent pieces. Eventually, later waves on survivals mostly turned into just walking around after the wave finishes and looking at every piece of gear to see if it's any better. This is kind of what I was referring to at the start of the video, where I was saying that it's sort of a tower defense game and it kind of shifts as you progress, because eventually, once you know the build for a map and you can do it pretty consistently, it becomes almost more of an incremental game where you complete the map and then you just kind of look around, see if any of the numbers are bigger than the one you have currently, and you're not really doing a whole lot. Which, you know, I completely enjoy incremental games and like seeing numbers go up, so I'm a big fan of that. Another thing you probably want to do is make folders in your inventory to be able to sort all of the stuff you get. It's a big process of, you know, going through each piece one by one and figuring out whether or not it's better or worse than what you've got on, and if it's worth keeping or upgrading or whatnot. So it's nice to be organized, have everything where you think it should be. I spent some time leveling up more heroes on Tavern Defense Nightmare. I wasn't able to beat the boss, but getting to the final wave nets about 24 million experience, so it's pretty convenient. Tinker's Lab first wave is probably still faster, but this was just easy to set up and I knew the build already. Next I went for Arcane Library on Nightmare, because it's pretty easy and it drops some accessories. While this plays in the background, I'll mention that Nightmare includes enemies from the Quest for the Lost Eternia Shards DLCs, namely the Spider, the Djinn, the Sharkin, and the Goblin Copter. Following Arcane Library, I then went to Hall of Court and beat the campaign on Nightmare, and then did the survival up to Wave 15. Wave 14 drops a genie on this map, and genies are great because they can generate mana for you based on how much damage you deal. They're really useful in those setup phases of the map where you need a lot of mana to upgrade all your towers super fast. Next, I went to King's Game, which is a step up in terms of difficulty from the maps I've been playing so far. Beating this on Nightmare unlocks the survival mode, which will let me farm for even more transcendent pieces and even a couple supremes. Then I went to Mega Citadel in an attempt to unlock the survival mode on Insane. The pet drops on survival on this map are really nice and they're super useful for a specific map we'll need to do later, but I end up getting destroyed by the boss because I wasn't really ready for it. Running Dread Dungeon again for some more gear, I found my first ultimate piece, and it was actually pretty good for builders. Of course, I have nobody that can equip it yet, but it's good to have. I did a bunch of grinding, mostly on Dread Dungeon and Arcane Library, and I decided to take on Akatiti Jungle on Insane. I've always liked this map, and it's a fun little challenge. It's got the mech boss at the end, and by completing the puzzle, you can get a turtle on a treadmill pet, which isn't particularly great, but I like it. Unfortunately, I died to the boss, and my tower's DPS wasn't very good, so I wasn't able to get it done. For a change of pace, I tried Tinker's Lab on Nightmare, and I actually managed to beat it. I don't really see much point in doing this map currently, as I couldn't really farm it on survival yet, but it's nice to have it done for when I do get to that point. Returning to Mega Citadel with a much better build and strategy, I was able to beat it on Insane pretty easily. Next, I did something I wasn't sure if I was ready for. I found a build and I went for it, but I didn't think my stats would have been enough. This map is Infested Ruins, which is generally one of the best maps to farm for armor, or at least it was back in the day. I'm not sure with the invention of Ruthless mode, if it still is one of the best. But it's definitely a gatekeepy map, because if you can beat this and farm it consistently, then you're starting to get into the mid to late game. Somehow though, the build held true, and I was able to beat the boss. I can't believe that worked. Holy shit. Then of course I had to try it out on survival. I'm not doing that right now, so we're gonna see how long this lasts. It was all going well, and I made it to wave 19, and then I got kicked from the game. Alright, so what just happened is the game effectively just kicked me for a reason I don't know. My internet didn't go out, so it kind of sucks because I had it all set up and it was looking like I was gonna make it, a couple more waves, but yeah, that sucks. See, like, your online connection was lost. Online features are disabled until you sign back into the network. I am signed in. Like, my internet's not, it didn't go out. Like, my internet's fine. Oh, let me show you. Oh, it's fucking Tuesday. God damn it. It's the Steam servers. That's my fault. I should have known. I was only deterred for a day, though, as I came back the next day and made it to wave 27 before I decided to call it. The ogres were getting too much HP, and I didn't think I would be able to last much longer in any case, so I just decided enough was enough, and I had gotten what I wanted. multiple ultimates, a bunch of supremes, and a huge amount of transcendence, I was starting to roll in with some nice gear. At this point, I decided now was the time I needed a really good DPS pet, and the best one to get, but it's also the easiest at the time, was the free-range chicken. This map is called Spring Valley, and this is why I needed to farm Mega Citadel on insane survivals before. The Harpoon pet makes this map extremely easy. You just have to protect the core from the waves of enemies as it moves across the field, and then survive a final wave at the end. Doing this will net you an egg. 1 egg for every hero. If you amass 10 eggs, which requires you to run this map about 3 times, you will unlock a free-range chicken. Just look at the DPS output on this fucking thing. With the hero boost, he's dealing over 9 million damage on a single attack, 26 million damage per second. This is what we're talking about. Next, I wanted to try Coastal Bazaar, which is another map I had never really successfully done before in the past, so I wanted to get it off my bucket list. I don't think it was very useful in terms of farming or anything. It's about the same, if not a little worse, than Infested Ruins, so I just wanted to get it done for my own sake. It was at this point I had decided now was the time for me to take on the Crystalline Dimension. You see, I didn't mention this at the beginning of the video, but when I reset my progress and started again, the goal for this video, the challenge I had set myself, was for me to be able to beat Crystalline Dimension Nightmare solo. I had never done it before. That's what all this was for. 60 hours of progress. I could have done a lot faster, I'm sure. And I probably didn't need to wait this long. You know, my stats are in the 3 to 4-ish thousand range, so I could definitely have done this earlier. But Crystalline Dimensions, it's pretty difficult. It takes a long time. I wanted to be prepared. Another thing I'll mention is all of the footage you've been seeing was recorded about 8 months ago. See, I had started this process back in November of last year, and I was playing every day. I was making great progress. It was incredibly fun. But eventually, I kind of got burnt out, got distracted by other things. I made it to the point where I'd made the decision that I would be going for the Crystalline Dimension. As you can see, I'm doing Mistymire Forest, which is the first of the Lost Eternia Shards maps, and one of the required maps to unlock the Crystalline Dimension. But after completing this map, and the next map, Morago Desert Town, I stopped. I didn't play anymore. Like I said, I got distracted, focused on other things, other projects, other games. As the months went on, I began to be okay with that. I thought, I'll come back to it later. I'll get it done another time. Whenever I get in the mood to play Dungeon Defenders again, I'll return to it. Now I had gotten the motivation to edit this video, but I had come to the conclusion I wasn't going to beat Crystalline Dimension. I didn't want to. I didn't feel like it. I thought the video would be good enough as is. Really, this has just been an excuse for me to talk about one of my favorite games. I didn't need to complete the challenge I had set out for myself for it to be a good video. And I was okay with that. I had fully edited up until this very moment, right here. But as I was explaining this, I had said something along the lines of, I got distracted. I'm okay with not beating Crystalline Dimension. I don't play this game to beat a specific map that's not even really required for endgame progression. It's required for some achievements and eventually if you want to increase your storage on your inventory and things of that nature, but if you just care about seeing the numbers go up, farming cool maps, getting good gear, you don't really need to do it. And if you really want the content that it unlocks, you can just ask for help, like I had done previously. On another account, on another run-through of this game, I asked for help in the Discord, and I got helped by a guy who one-shot the boss. Oh my god! Holy fucking shit! And so, it was decided. I was almost done editing this video. But, as I got to saying that, as I got to talking about how I didn't do the challenge, I didn't beat Crystalline Dimension, I realized something. That's not who I want to be. I set out a challenge for myself. And after 60 hours, I was going to give up right on the edge of what I was setting out to do? No, I can't do that. So, for the first time in almost a year, I booted up the game. The first order of business was to complete the remaining 2 Eternia Shards maps, the first one being Aquanos. It was fairly easy, although I did end up dying to the boss the first time because I got one shot somehow. What? But I immediately ran it back and managed to beat the boss. What in the fuck? Just have to stop being a fucking idiot. Jesus Christ. Next up was Sky City, which is a much simpler build and a much easier boss in my opinion, as long as you know how to do it. This one, instead of fighting a giant kraken or a singular entity, you're fighting a goblin mech ship. After taking a certain amount of damage, it electrocutes the entire deck of the ship, so if you're still on it, you instantly die. There is a place where you can stay on the ship, but not get electrocuted, but it's kind of a glitchy spot, and I didn't really want to mess with it. I don't really know how to do it, so I just jumped off and jumped back on. But like I said, this build is much easier than Aquanos, as I can just stack everything in the center with a couple of auras near the crystals, and everything will funnel towards the center because of the forest golem's aggro, and they won't be able to make it to the crystals. Something else to keep in mind is that the enemy type that's introduced in this map, the Goblin Copters, which are flying little helicopters that drop off ogres wherever they land. The ogres themselves and the Goblin Copters can't actually deal damage to the crystals, so they're not really a threat to the crystals, which allows you to build in certain ways that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. I took a bit of a detour to play Akatiti Jungle on Insane. The most recent update changed the way the weapons work on this map, and so I wanted to try them out. The weapons I was going for were the swords, as they changed them to be projectile based instead of just pure melee. I have a lot of good memories on this map, as I used to farm it back in the day because the weapons are pretty decent stat sticks. They tend to roll pretty decently on Insane, so it's a relatively easy map that gives you good stats on the weapons. There is a boss on this map, but it's just a goblin mech, so it's relatively simple to beat. On Nightmare, it tends to have a lot of health, so you'd probably want to use an EV to kind of just DPS it down, but on Insane, a monk with a good weapon and pet will get the job done. Unfortunately, I forgot that these map drops are randomized. The end of map rewards will grant you a weapon that you can use, so by filling 3 of the 4 player slots with squires or barbarians, since they can only equip swords, that should mean that you'll get 3 swords from this. But some maps are randomized, like this one, and so I got random weapon drops. Okay, that's pretty... It's okay. Why did I only get 1? Hello? Why did I get 3 clocks? Is it randomized? Oh no. It's randomized. Okay. The next day, I did some practice runs of the final boss. I'll mention this now, but there are multiple ways you can play the game. The online mode is separated into ranked and open. Ranked mode is basically what everyone plays. It allows you to get Steam achievements, and there's no user-created content. Open, on the other hand, allows you to use the Steam Workshop to play user-created content. A lot of the top-rated maps that were in the user-created content are actually now in the official game in ranked mode. But what you can do is you can copy your ranked information into the open section, which will allow you to test out strategies, try out some of the workshop maps, and use these specific ones that allow you to practice difficult boss fights before you actually have to spend 40 minutes trying to get there and then just to die in the first wave because you've never fought them before. There's also local, which is kind of like an offline mode, but it uses the same save as your open. So if you make progress on open save, it'll also transfer into local. You also can't copy over the open data into ranked, as there are specific workshop maps and stuff that give you items that just aren't obtainable in the regular game. Feeling satisfied, I decided to try out Crystalline Dimension. Crystalline Dimension is basically a gauntlet of 4 different maps and then a final boss fight. The first 3 maps are pretty standard Dungeon Defenders maps, where you have to protect the crystals and fight off waves of enemies. These maps tend to be massive, and they were definitely made with the intention of multiple people playing at the same time, but they're definitely possible solo. I tried a couple different builds, but I didn't really find one that worked well for me on this first map. Eventually, I just defaulted to putting minions around each crystal, which seemed to work just fine. I'll also mention here, what you're seeing right now is me running around with a weapon called the Chicken Baller on my Jester with a genie pet. Now, those are a lot of words, but I'll explain it all. The Jester, like we went over before, has the fastest cast rate in the game, which makes it excellent at upgrading towers. Upgrading towers requires mana. A lot of the times you don't want to be relying on mana that's dropped from enemies, so you need a genie pet. Genie pets will grant you mana whenever you deal damage. I don't know the exact calculation, but that's the simplistic version of it. So, in order to deal damage in an easy, non-specific, you don't have to aim, you don't even have to think kind of way, the Chicken Baller comes in handy, and other weapons similar to it, where you just shoot out of a bunch of projectiles that bounce around and they're bound to hit enemies at some point, so you don't even have to look at enemies, you just hold the button down, and eventually you'll get mana magically. The second map of the Crystalline Dimension Gauntlet might be my least favorite map in the game. It is so massive, it takes forever to walk around. In order to build this map, you have to spend like 5 minutes just building, and the waves take maybe 2 minutes max. It's just really frustrating, and I guess it would be a lot easier if you had multiple people playing, but I don't, and I wanted to do it solo, and so here I am. There are also mini bosses on these maps, which are crystalline versions of your heroes, so the Apprentice, Monk, Squire, and Huntress. Although I only saw the Monk and the Apprentice on my runs, I'm not sure exactly where the Squire or the Huntress would spawn. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. The third map of the Crystalline Dimension is a lot better than the second map in my opinion. It's still big, but it's all in a circle and it's much easier to build and upgrade. I'll also point out here, up at the top, you've got a time limit for the entire Crystalline Dimension Gauntlet. However, they give you like an hour and a half almost, so you really shouldn't be running out of time. The fourth map of the Crystalline Dimension is a boss gauntlet. You have 40 seconds, realistically a bit more because the timer's kind of slow, but 40 seconds to prepare some towers to protect your crystals while you're fighting the bosses, which are crystalline versions of the 3 main bosses, the Demon Lord, Goblin Mech, and the Ancient Dragon. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I completely forgot that this was a thing. I think I got confused because there's another version of this that's a single map called Boss Rush. And so I was not really prepared for this. I looked up a build pretty quick and I gave it a try, and then I immediately lost. Oh, instant. Okay, that's interesting. No. No! It was pretty devastating. You know, all that effort, 30 minutes, probably 20 minutes just building. But that wasn't going to stop me. I came back later that same day and tried again. With stronger, more consistent builds, I ran through the first map with no issues. And learning from my past mistakes, the second map came and went. I hadn't failed on the third map yet, and that wasn't going to change this time. Doing a better job of building for the boss gauntlet and taking out the demon lords as fast as possible, the fourth and final map would fall before me. That's it? I thought that was... Okay. Okay, this... lock in, buddy! Huge. Turn it off. Jump! Please get him on. So close. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Jump. Clear him out. All right. Well, we can't really avoid that, actually. Stay close. Okay, that's one cycle. That's 26 million? Okay. So it will be 2 cycles. Ow! Holy fuck. Big. Jump. Please focus on the big guy, man. Nice. Oh, brother. Big damage! Holy fuck, this is perfect. Hero boost. Boom! Boom! Oh, okay. So there went the hardcore, but that's why we are not doing this on hardcore. Do I lose all my mana? I do. That's fine. Jump. Okay, good. We got him. Jump. Huge. Roger. It's fine. Oh, I'm trapped. Yep, that's fine. I think we got this in the bag. I mean, that's pretty devastating that he does that attack while I'm dead, but it's not the end of the world. Stay back here. Jump. Come on. Just a little. Let's fucking go. There it is, baby. Oh, man. It wasn't on hardcore, but I'm happy, man. And so, there it was. I successfully beat the challenge I had set out for myself almost a year ago. Took a bit of a break in there, but we got it done. This truly is a game that I will continue to come back to for years. I don't foresee it dropping out of my top 10 anytime soon, and even though I might have a couple gripes with the game, I still love it. This probably won't even be the last time you see this game on this channel. I got a couple ideas for some challenges to play through. Before I go, I want to mention a couple of great resources that you should use if you do decide to play this game for longer than the main campaign. The first resource is the Dungeon Defenders Runs and Giveaways Discord. It's definitely the most active group of players, and they're really great. They've got a help channel. If you have any questions, just post it in there and they'll answer you. The second place I'll mention is DunDef Planner. This is a website that allows people to create and share builds of different maps, and it's something I use often when playing this game. Next is Chiku's Zero to Early Late Game Progression Guide. I wouldn't recommend starting with this, as it takes a route that kind of skips through a lot of the main story, just in the most efficient way of progressing if you want to get to late game faster, but if you ever get stuck on something and don't know where to go or what to farm, this is a great reference. They also include video references as well for all of the maps listed, so I'll link to their channel below. I found Chiku's to be the most complete and up to date, but there are other guides on Steam as well, namely Progression from Start to Finish, Endgame Progression, Beginner's Guide to DD, Clear the Game on Nightmare, and Dungeon Defender's 100% Solo Walkthrough. These are all good guides, although they might not be as up to date as Chiku's. If you'd prefer to watch YouTube content, Dungeon Defender's 1 to 100 from Scratch by RetroPat is a great video series of him going through the game. If you want a more experienced player's perspective, Theoran's got a great channel that goes over a lot of more advanced Dungeon Defenders content. So, there it is. And yeah, I know there's a sequel, Dungeon Defenders 2, and a remaster, Dungeon Defenders Awakened. And I also know and own a copy of Dungeon Defenders Eternity, which was their first attempt at remaking this game. But for me, the original stands the test of time. It is my 7th favorite game of all time. If you're interested in seeing what other games are on the list, I guess you have to wait and see. I've made a Google Sheet, which I'll update whenever I upload a new video of the list. Eventually, I plan to make a video for all 50 games on the list. But for now, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.